Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about the aspect of color correcting in makeup that has been something I've been doing for years, and it's definitely been my most useful trick in getting rid of under eye discoloration and any sort of dark spots, dark patches on the skin. So if you're looking to get rid of any problem like that, you have come to the right place, because we're going to be talking about all kinds of formulas, shades, just every format possible of this peachy type of corrective product. Whether you're dealing with a little bit of discoloration or a lot of discoloration, I think there will be a product today that I mention that may be just right for you. I'm also going to mention a couple of corrector type palettes as well. For me, my biggest problem areas on my face tend to be wanting to lighten up any under eye discoloration, so it can look anywhere on my skin tone. It can go anywhere from being a little bit bluish or purpley to just kind of dull looking, you know? So I noticed that right on the inner part, like sides of my nose. Sometimes it can stretch down in this area a bit as well. So that's a very good place for me to use a peachy corrector. Also, a couple years ago when I was pregnant with Belle, I had melasma big time, and it surfaced on me right on the tops of my cheeks. And I know my mom told me she had that during her pregnancy. So it can be kind of a genetic thing. I do have a video talking much more about that, but it looks just like, you know, dark patches of skin. Some people get it on the upper lip or elsewhere on their face. And after quite a bit of trial and error, I realized that outside of just the fullest coverage foundation I could possibly reach for, in terms of a concealing product, the peachy tone correctors really work best for the melasma type spot, or also if you're dealing with age spots, sunspots, any kind of concentrated darkness on the face. That's a very hard thing to cover up. You might be saying, well, what's the advantage of these peachy correctors over just a skin tone concealer that I've been using for years? And I'm not saying you won't run into a skin tone concealer that has amazing coverage and can absolutely do the job for you, but in my experience with a lot of concealers, they would lighten my problems up, whether it be the under eye, melasma, sunspots, you name it. It would make it appear lighter, but I could still see it. So it basically just altered the tone a little bit. And then when I would bring in the right shade of a peachy corrector, it would really like camouflage the problem. And I just think that's a very valuable trick to have in your makeup toolbox. And anything else general I can get out of the way before I jump into the products. In terms of the sequence of application, I will usually apply a foundation first, and then I go in with my concealer, because I kind of assess at that point, okay, how much did my foundation cover up? And then I may be able to use more or less corrector depending on the day, or, you know, whatever the problem might be. But if you're not a type who likes to even wear foundation, and let's say the only issue on your skin is some dark under eye, or the only issue is some sunspots, you could by all means just start tackling those straight away with a corrector and, you know, just go about your business. You don't need to pair foundation with these for them to work. Two factors that I think will affect the coverage you get out of a corrector would be the consistency. So you'll find some come in a liquid form, some come in a thicker cream form. I find that the liquids always tend to be more sheer than the creams. I mean, when you think of the concept of laying it on thick in your head in order to cover something up, going with a thicker consistency is going to lay it on thicker and just give you an easier job coverage wise compared to a thinner consistency. Also, the tone of the product. So you'll find peachy correctors can be anywhere from like a light pastel peach, almost a little bit close to pink, or, you know, they can be really, really deep. Some of them very bold and orangey, and that can be better for a darker skin tone. So you really want to have an awareness of what is your skin tone, and that will help you understand how light or dark to go with your peachy corrector. And I'll be pointing that out as we go. But talking about a few liquids first, I have a couple of these in like a click up pen form. I've also got, you know, a doe foot applicator type style here. And I would say the lightest one that I have, and so it performs much more like a brightener. It's less corrective, more just overall, practically like a highlighting pen. And it's the Maybelline Dream Lumi in the shade Radiant. And it does have just that little bit of a light peach, little towards pink tone, so I wanted to mention it in this video. If you barely got any discoloration, or you're of a light skin tone and you just want added brightness, this could be a good thing to use. The consistency is thin. It's going to be, you know, pretty light in terms of coverage. Now, I wanted to try this MAC Prep+Prime highlighter highlighter in the shade Bright Forecast, and they have these in several different tones, and this would be the most peachy. It's got a little more yellow in it compared to the last one I mentioned, and again, I feel like it's a lighter coverage product. It's more for brightening. If you were to put this over really dark under eye discoloration or a really dark spot, you would notice it being lightened, but not necessarily erased. And that doesn't make these bad products, it just makes them, I think, more suited to the person who has barely their discoloration and a lighter skin tone. Then we've got a product like this Urban Decay Naked Skin. They've put out various color correcting products, and this is the one called Peach. It's not too yellow, it's not too pink, and it's definitely got the best coverage out of these liquidy products that I've mentioned. Also, when you apply this, if you're not one who likes to mess with any sort of setting powder on top of your concealer, you just like to be kind of a one and done type situation, this might be a good one to use because it doesn't leave your skin feeling especially tacky or dewy. Now, that being said, it doesn't really offer a lot of moisture to your skin as well. I think light to medium skin tones would benefit most from this shade, and while the coverage is better than those last couple I mentioned, I still don't think it goes quite as far as some of the creamy consistencies that come in little pots that I'll be referencing coming up. For me personally, the darkness of my circles isn't always exactly the same. Some days it's worse than others. Today it wasn't too terribly bad, and I did use a couple of these liquids just to show you what the finished effect looks like. So I've got the Urban Decay under this eye, and for a lightish discoloration, you know, this covered it pretty well, I thought. And then I used the MAC Prep+Prime over here, which is a little more sheer, and I feel like I can still see just a little bit more of the circle area peeking through on this eye. So if you noticed any difference there, you're right. I used two different products, and I just wanted to do that to demonstrate to you the fact that those are different coverage levels. Now, as we get into the creams, I do have one that I want to mention that's in a stick format, and it's from Smashbox. It's the one called Look Less Tired Light, and I think they have a deeper tone of a peachy concealer as well. This is a pretty orangey peach. It's less like salmony than that Naked Skin concealer is, and it can do a pretty good job. It's nice because it's not too light, so I don't feel like it simply, you know, lightens the discoloration. You get a little bit fuller coverage with this consistency of a product, which is just like a cream formed into a pencil. But as far as the tone goes, I think skin tones that are just a little deeper than me might benefit from this even more, because whenever I use this, while I do feel it's correcting, it's also just a little on the dark side. But I do think when you get into tones that lack that little bit of pinky salmon color, you lose some brightening that could happen there. For me, the most effective way to conceal a dark spot, or let's say my darkest level of under eye discoloration, is to use a product called Benefit Erase Paste. I've tried a lot of correctors. You're seeing me talk about many different kinds. This color is definitely where it's at for me. This is in the shade number 2 medium, and for my skin tone, it just is the perfect amount of pink and peach and the consistency that allows for a lot of nice coverage. Also, you got to think about where on my face am I applying this? If it's mainly, you know, to the under eye, is that an area where you're getting dry? Are you starting to notice signs of aging skin there? Skin that just looks kind of dehydrated and fine lines, etc. You may want to reach for one of these creamier concealers that I'll be talking about, because they give a little something back to that area. If you're a fan of the baking method, so if you like to apply a concealer that's maybe a little more emollient and then set it with a whole lot of powder, this would be a good concealer that would really respond to that. Just because this erase paste feels like the exact right tone for my skin tone, you may be a little bit different skin tone for me. You may have tried this and it just didn't do exactly what you hoped it would, and so that might mean you want to experiment with some other kinds. A more recent find that I actually really like the consistency of, it's not quite as creamy as erase paste, like it doesn't seem quite as emollient as that product, but it's still easy to use. It's definitely not drying, and it's the Fiona Styles Full Cover Perfect Finish Concealer in the Peach Corrector shade. It's a hint more yellow than the erase paste, but it definitely does a good job of correcting, and it's something I feel like I can kind of bounce back and forth with. If you felt like the erase paste was too creamy for you, this might be one to check out. Packaging on this stuff is really cool from that line. line, by the way. Another option that I've talked about for years that is incredibly close to Erase Paste in tone, but considerably less creamy and a little less creamy than the Fiona Styles option. Still nice, and it's the Pixi Correction Concentrate in the shade Brightening Peach. But a definite perk to the Pixi product is it's going to be a little bit lower priced than these other ones that I've mentioned. You're sacrificing a little bit of the creaminess there, but it's still really nice to work with, I must say. It's a great option. Another product that I've talked about for many years that's really in my sweet spot of the peachy pink salmon, just right in there on the color tone, is my Bobbi Brown Corrector in Bisque. The reason why I tend to recommend Benefit Erase Paste over this one is just the value. This is like the third one of these that I've had. You hit pan so quickly. There's just way more product in here, but the consistency of this is nice. It's really almost as rich and creamy as Erase Paste. If you're a hardcore like Bobbi Brown fan, like to use a lot of products in that line, the Corrector in Bisque is definitely a good corrector to use if you're this kind of medium skin tone that I am, light to medium skin. Now I know Eve Pearl really coined the whole like salmon concealer thing for her brand. She's really known for pushing this concept, and I have her dual salmon concealer here in the shade Fair-Light. What's cool about the way she does it is you're getting two tones here. So you've got one that's a little deeper, one that can kind of help you customize the level of brightness. And I like the pigment in these products. I think they're easy enough to blend out, but they are, and you can probably just tell by the way the light's hitting it. These have always felt just a little bit greasy to me, and I do think it's a fine line between something that you feel like is offering some moisture back to your skin and something that is just oily feeling. So I've always kind of felt like if Eve Pearl dialed it back a little bit on the oiliness, these could have even better coverage than they do. So they're not my top pick, but I definitely wanted to give that a mention. As far as a little bit deeper tone, something that works for more medium to tan skin, It Cosmetics makes something called Bye Bye Under Eye Corrector, and I had picked this up in the shade medium, but this is deeper, a little bit deeper than Benefit Erase Paste, and last summer I found myself reaching for this even more than my Erase Paste just because my skin tone had darkened a little bit and it needed a little bit deeper corrector, and this did a great job. It's nice and creamy, not quite as creamy as this, but creamy enough for sure. Now you might have noticed recently that BECCA has put out a line of color correctors. This is the one that's labeled peach, and it's downright pretty orangey, and they have one even deeper than that labeled papaya, and it looks pretty darn red. So if you are of a rich tan deep skin tone, you may be wanting to look into color correction that's going to be absolutely very pigmented like this. On my skin tone, this peach shade is too much for me. I know that because when I blend it over the problem, I'm still seeing the problem area. I'm seeing this product color on my skin, whereas those lighter tones of peach really mask the problem. But I want you to know that if you're a deeper skin tone, you're still dealing with spots and darkness that you want to cover. There are some options out there for you as well. Last thing to mention here are a couple of color correcting palettes that I've tried. One that I didn't like so much, one that I did like quite a bit. First up, from Makeup Revolution, they have this thing called the Ultra Base Corrector palette. Problem for me is that I feel like this is just a palette full of brighteners. Everything is so light, I don't feel like I actually get correction on my skin. But they are a very thin, kind of on the greasy side as far as the consistency goes. So that's kind of a problem for me, but I think the biggest issue here is that none of these tones really go deep enough to actually color correct a dark circle. Now, if the use of creams on your skin in more ways beyond just concealing and color correcting is of interest to you, you may want to look into this palette from Tarte. It's called the Wipeout Color Correcting Palette. I've actually really enjoyed this. I think they've got a fabulous formula in here that's very creamy. I mean, you just put your finger in it, it feels rich. It's got a nice level of coverage to it. You've got two tones of concealer down here. I find one to have a hair more pink and one is a bit more yellowy, but they are very close. One thing that you can do to adjust those tones is work in more or less of this shade right up here. If you're a very dark skin tone, you might use a lot of this orangey shade to correct under eyes, or for me, I might add just a little bit of that to one of these. There's also a green in here. Some people will use this to correct redness. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I also don't have a lot of experience with it either. Redness has never been my biggest problem, and any amount of it that I've had has been able to be easily tackled by even just a rinky-dink type concealer. But that is here for you. You've got the yellow, like I said, that can add even more brightness or like a highlighted effect if you wanted to. And then you've got a nice cream contour in here as well that I think is a super workable tone. There's a big mirror. Even with everything I've tried, my holy grail remains to be the Erase Paste, just because I love the amount of moisture in this product, the amount of coverage it has, the tone for the way my skin is most months out of the year seems to be pretty perfect for eradicating the under eye circles or a dark spot. This was also able to tackle much bigger problems on my skin, like the melasma I was talking about. Just a quick note about application on these. You can use your fingers to apply them. I think fingers really do help the product melt into the skin. Also, a dampened beauty blender can kind of shear out the product just a little bit, but it's good about picking up some excess, and I think giving you the lightest feel possible, even with some of those very creamy concealers. Over the years, I've experimented with a lot of brushes as well. This is my Sigma P80, and you know, that's a nice kind of not too small, not too large size for getting right in this area. But lately, my current favorite way of going about it that I think gives me the best texture on the under eye area, let's say, is to apply the product to the skin. You can easily do that just with your fingers. Dab over it with a beauty blender, whether it be the Micro Mini or whatever size you prefer. The Micro Mini really hits the area easily. And then maybe I'm just goofy, but I swear this is doing something. I blot over it just one more time with my fingers because I think it somehow just makes it look even more natural, even more melted into the skin. And then with a lot of the creamy ones that I mentioned, I would dust a little bit of a powder on top of that to set it. I know that's a personal preference type thing. For me, I feel like I do get an even more perfected look when this whole area is mattified. I experiment with a lot of different setting powders. You can just go to any random pressed powder you may have that you really like. The By Terry Hyaluronic Hydra powder is a great but expensive powder, but it's really nice for, you know, the under eye area because it does not give you the look of dryness whatsoever. It also is just extremely weightless. And then one that I've been experimenting with that's kind of been my latest thing that I'm trying out is this L'Oreal Hydra Perfect powder, which is, you know, intended to be an all over face powder, but I've been sort of targeting it on the under eye area lately just to see what kind of effect I can get there. It definitely mattifies and it is lightweight, but that could be a whole other topic for a whole separate video. So thank you guys for watching this one. I hope it helped, and I will see you very soon. Bye.